Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Lee Meacham. Welcome, Lee. Great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks.
Good.
Lee is Workforce Development Coordinator for the Albion Foundation. Now, the Albion Foundation is, of course, the charity arm of West Brom. So, Lee, why don't you tell us a bit more about the organisation before we talk about Play Their Way?
Yeah, so the foundation actually started back in 1990, and it was an initiative put in by kind of the FA to increase community participation within football. And usually a retired ex-player would kind of run some football camps within the summer holidays, and over the years they've just grown, and now we're a real hub of the community, offering not only football but sports coaching, behaviour mentoring, working with people from 18 months old all the way up to, we've got 80, 19-year-old participants who come to some of our kind of memory sessions, and we've got a Hawthorns hub where they come and have a cup of tea and a biscuit and just chat about West Brom. So we've, like I say, we're a real hub of the community, and we're there to support our local area.
There's loads of football camp provision across the organisation, isn't there? And I know you've been big supporters and adopters of the Play Their Way model. So how have you ensured that's been rolled out consistently across such a big organisation?
Yeah, I think, we've got a real big CPD offer at the foundation to help staff grow and develop. Obviously, we've got, I think, close to 70 full-time members of staff. So that offer looks different for all different, teams and departments. But I think on the whole, in terms of our delivery cohort, we've put on a session on our Wednesday morning, which is our CPD morning. So we've put workshops on there for them to come and engage with and learn a little bit more about Play Their Way. And hopefully we're starting to see that now, go live into the sessions out in the community.
Now that you're centering a child first approach, what are you looking for in the coaches that you employ? Has that changed over time?
Yeah, I think it starts right from the planning stage, and coaches having a real mindset to plan, I suppose, ownership into their coaching right from the start for their participants. So yeah, I think it starts in the planning stage, and then obviously once they go to the session and start actually coaching live on the grass or in the sports hall, wherever that might be, it's actually then putting it into practice. So are you giving, your participants a choice and a voice within their session to, create ownership within that?
Are you seeing a change in outcomes for the coached young people in and around the West Bromwich and the Black Country area with this kind of change of approach to things?
I think a big one is we've done some work with our West Brom Power Chairs coaches. So we're quite successful in the power chair area across the country and even into Europe as well, with our teams regularly winning competitions, Premier League, FA Cups, etc. And those coaches, once they receive the Play Their Way workshop, really put more of an emphasis on fun, especially for potentially not the first team, but the second team, for example, and going down into the youth age groups, that they wanted to make their sessions within their power chair environment more fun for these participants. And I think we're starting to see that now with different practices coming in, instead of just a technical practice where they're passing in a pattern. They're really starting to get these skills into a more fun-based practical session.
We know from conversations that we have on this podcast all the time that football academies are starting to get quite a poor reputation around that lack of fun and the amount of seriousness for small children and young athletes, though we hate to call them that. They're just kids playing sport. How much do you think you're trying to move the dial with an organisation like the West Brom Foundation to make sure that fun and play is centred at the heart of all of these football exploits for kids?
Yeah, I think there is a big difference between community coaching and academy coaching. And to some extent, I do agree with that. Both have got different, I suppose, end goals. So I think, we're, in terms of a community organisation, that's at the forefront of what we want to do. We want to create a love for not just football, a love for sport and physical activity in general. So I think having those at the forefront really, hopefully encourages children and young people to grow that love for sport and continue that into adulthood.
So what are your measured outcomes as an organisation like the West Bromwich Foundation? Is it participation? Is it building footballers of the future? Is it a decade's time season ticket holders for the club?
Yeah, I think we've got so many different, I suppose, departments and areas and projects within the foundation. It differs so much, but obviously, we do. I think our ultimate aim is to support the local community, make sure that community is living a healthy lifestyle. So, as I mentioned, creating that love for sport and physical activity. The football development pathway, they've got different strategies in terms of hopefully giving players a chance to progress into academy football. Um, but we understand that children and young people, they don't all want to be academy football players. So we understand that some players come for the social aspect. So they'll come to our community sessions, yes, to play football, but ultimately to have fun and be with their friends. So yeah, I think it's just so diverse in terms of outcomes across the organisation that we've just got lots going on.
How do coaches have to react in those environments then? Say you've got a group and it's the first time you've seen this group together and you're going in with a coaching plan, but you realise that this group actually are here more for a social aspect of it. How do they think on their feet? How do they change things on the bounce to make sure that these kids want to come back next week and this hasn't been an hour or an hour and a half that they've been put off by?
I think ultimately the first one for me is building an environment, and if children are feeling safe and where they can be themselves in that environment, then they're more likely to come back. I think tagging on to that very closely though is relationship building. So if as a coach you can build great relationships with your participants, adding into that great environment, you've just got a base there for the kids to just want to basically live at that session and can't wait for it for the next week to come. So yeah, I think for me personally, it's making sure that environment's right and building those strong relationships with your participants.
Obviously, because of where West Brom is, Black Country, it's an incredibly diverse population in your area. How much has that affected these kind of sessions? When we're talking about voice and choice, how important is it when you've got kids who have come from perhaps backgrounds where their parents don't know a lot about football, they don't play football, but they now want to be involved?
Yeah, I think it's challenging depending on what kind of culture the young people have come from. Um, and I think language is also I wouldn't say a barrier, but another challenge, because if you've got a young person coming to your session for the first time, they might even be new into the country, so they might have only been in the country a few weeks. They can't speak English or very little English. Then that can be quite nerve wracking for that young person. So again, I'll go back to that environment, that relationship building. It all stems from that, and if you can build a good rapport, something I've done, over the years is I've tried to learn a few words in lots of different languages. Even just saying hello in someone's native tongue, it brings a massive smile to their face and it makes them feel welcome. So that's something that I've done over the years. Like I say, just try and learn a few words and try and learn about their culture and how they live life and how they see life. And I think if you're open minded to that, that instantly starts building that bond and relationship. And then, like I say, hopefully they could then keep wanting to come back to that session.
This is going to sound so cheesy, so do bear with me. But is play the universal language of the child, do you think? Is that the easiest way to get them involved?
100%. I think if they say football's kind of the world's kind of language, and you can go anywhere in the world and you don't have to be able to communicate with each other in language, but you put a ball at someone's feet and automatically you're kind of best friends. And I think that stretches to sport in general, not just football. If you had a badminton racket and a shuttlecock, you could do exactly the same. So yeah, I think it does bring people together. Sport does, and like I say, it's hopefully we're having an impact in the Sandwell area and bringing the local people together.
Obviously, Play Their Way is a collaboration of the Children's Coaching Collaborative, and it's all about coaching children and centering fun in that and play in that. But obviously, the foundation is, like you said, from 18 months to well over 80 years old. How much are you centering play in adult coaching within the foundation as well? And how much does that get forgotten?
Yeah, I think I'd probably say we're quite good at it at the foundation in West Brom. It's something that we, as I said, put to the forefront of our coaching. If the children aren't having fun, they're unlikely to come back. Fun is at the forefront of it. So I think from the younger age groups, we kind of base our practices around a theme or a story. So that might be Lilo and Stitch or Spider Man or whatever that might be. But even for the older age groups, especially in the PANS disability area, we focus a lot of their sessions around game-based coaching. So it's almost a real life game situation, but got some conditions or tweaks to it where we can develop them through kind of skill acquisition or whatever. Um, but again, walking football as well. It's more of a sociable session with the walking football. They regularly go out on social kind of get-togethers away from the pitch as well. So yeah, as I said, fun's just at the forefront of everything we do, and with that, is that play element where it's not so much technical based coaching. It's all play and fun and exploring, I suppose, different things within the practice.
I'm not suggesting that this podcast is an echo chamber, but generally speaking, the people we have on and the people we talk to drink the Kool-Aid when it comes to a child-first approach to coaching. And I know that at the West Brom Foundation, it's something that you guys have really adopted. Is it something that's always come naturally to you, or has this been learned by you as a coach? Is this how you started out?
I'd probably say so. I've been doing this just over 20 years now. In terms of coaching sports industry, I'd probably say the first 10 years I was a very command style coach. Do this, do that. This is how we do it. But I think in the last 10 years, I have kind of opened up my eyes to child centered approach. An example of that is, I've worked in the boys and the girls academy at West Brom. And when I've been in the girls' academy, it was very much you kind of had more freedom to go and explore your coaching and how you coached. So regularly, we'd task the girls with creating their own warm ups. We do a spin the wheel. So if I don't know, two girls got picked from spin the wheel, those two would come together and plan the warm up for the next session. And for the first 30 minutes of the session, they could then go and deliver their own warm up. So you're not only developing them as players, but you're also then giving life skills and developing them as people as well in terms of communication, leadership, that kind of stuff. But as well, warm ups as a whole, we used to have kind of a pack of cards that we made, and the girls could come in and choose what warm up they did as kind of an arrival activity. So there was lots of ownership within that, and that was probably my first taste of giving players ownership. And I think it's important to talk around that. I speak to a lot of coaches around this. I do a lot of work for Black Country Coaches Club within the Black Country, and that's a lot of work developing grassroots coaches. And a question I get asked a lot is, well, what if it goes wrong? What if they can't do it? And I said, but they're never going to do it unless you give them the chance. So I think some coaches are kind of scared to give players that ownership, but actually you'll be scared, you'll be kind of surprised to see, um, even young children can actually do things for themselves. They can come up with sessions, they can go and coach a little bit and put on and facilitate a game. So it's just being brave enough to give your players the chance to go and do it, and I guarantee that they'll surprise you and they'll come up with something fantastic.
Do you personally enjoy it more now, having a change in approach? Do you look at it as that first 10 years and what you got out of it then, and this second 10 years and what you get out of it now?
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's definitely improved me as a coach, and I think that the players that I've worked with in the last 10 years have definitely got more out of my sessions, my coaching. And even the coaches I work with, the Black Country coaches, they seem to get more out of it because I kind of almost do the same model with them as well. And I think one of the biggest rewards was when I come out of boys academy football, I went down to MJPL level. So we've got an MJPL kind of pathway at West Brom. So I went down to that level of coaching, and for the last three games of the season, I gave the boys complete ownership over their game day. So again, spin the wheel type scenario. Two boys were picked who wanted to kind of step up, and they were the managers for the game. So we turn up to play the game on a Saturday morning, and these two players had come together in the week. They'd pick the formation, they'd pick the starting team, they'd do the subs, they'd do the warm up. Everything on the match day was kind of left to those two players, and they'd almost be kind of mini managers. And giving them that ownership, one, they thrived off it. I think they learned so much. Again, going back into those life skills, communication, leadership, but also learnt more about the game itself, because then they had to understand tactics a little bit more. They had to think about when they made a substitution and stuff like that. And the boys actually won all of those 3 games at the end of the season. So I think, firstly, to see them thrive in that situation was so rewarding for me. But then for them to get the winning result as well in those 3 games again was just a cherry on top of the cake. So again, just being brave and giving them ownership created great results.
We ask all the time if coaches find it hard to adapt to this change in culture and change, this revolution of coaching. Do children find it difficult to adapt? Do you find that there are kids at a certain age where they've been coached in a certain way for so long and they can't find the voice that they have? Or do you think this comes so naturally to kids, as soon as we give them the space to go and do it, they will take the opportunity?
For me personally, and my experience, I think it comes down to the children or the child's personality and their character. Um, I think it depends how they've kind of been brought up in home life and what their culture's like at home. You'll get some children that naturally take to it and want to be the leader and want to go out and take ownership over their own sport. But on the other hand, you've got some children who couldn't think of anything worse and they want to be kind of I suppose, told what to do and be given instructions. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, if I'm honest. I think it's just you adapting as a coach to understand your group, understand your participants and them as individuals. And, if there are children in your group that flourish by giving ownership, go and give them it. If there's children that prefer instruction, give them instruction. And I think it's you, like I say, adapting as a coach to provide that environment for the participants you're working with.
How do you balance those two kids in the same session? How do you make sure that both of them being heard, whether it's because they're very quiet or they're very loud?
I think from in terms of someone who prefers having ownership, I think you just, as I say, throw them in there and they'll swim, so to speak. Give them challenges around leading others and question around, what ideas have we got? How can we make this more challenging? How can we make it more easy? How can we make it more fun? The person who's more reserved and likes instruction, you might do that more on a one-to-one basis away from the group. So it might be more fly-by coaching, that kind of strategy, I suppose.
I was talking to a friend on the weekend whose son has just started playing community football, and we were talking about Play Their Way, because obviously I tell everybody about Play Their Way. And we were talking about what choice looks like for kids. And she's doing a bit of coaching with the group. And she said, yeah, but if I give them choice, it's going to turn into chaos because they're only 6-year-olds. What do you say to coaches who are concerned about choice looking like that? How much is choice not about just giving them free rein, but giving them options?
I would say embrace it. I think that if you've got a group of 6-year-olds, if you look at their game day or when they play a more structured kind of game of football, for example, it probably does look like chaos. So if your training's replicating that chaos, surely you're providing them with an opportunity to go and flourish within that chaos. And as they get older, that chaos will naturally kind of diminish as they learn about tactics and structure of positions and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I think embrace it. I think if you've got a chaotic session, even at older age groups, football can get quite chaotic at times within moments of games. So yeah, go and embrace it, because then you bring in real life scenarios and moments into your practice, which can only benefit the players, because then they're going to learn how to deal with that chaos. So yeah, chaos is not necessarily a bad thing within sport. Yes, you've got to have some structure, and that environment's got to be right to make sure it's safe. But ultimately, if you've got a chaotic situation, that happens at the top. If you look at the Premier League, it happens in there as well. So, yeah, my kind of thoughts on that is embrace it.
What are the greater impacts of giving children choice, though? Not just in
Right.
terms of the outcomes of a chaotic session looks like real gameplay in reality, but how much can it affect their love of being involved, their continued participation by knowing that they've got choices in that environment and they're not going to spend an hour being told just what to do?
Yeah, I think as humans we like choice, don't we? The more choice we've got, the better. And so I think it's kind of a human trait really to kind of want leadership over your life and what you're doing. So if you're going into a sports session and you've got choice over what you do in that sports session, um, I think that can only create a greater love for attending that session and potentially a greater love for that sport. I think as coaches, our job there is to kind of continue to make sure we're checking and challenging. Um, so if you've got a group of young people going into a session and they're playing this great game, that's brilliant. They've set up this game, but then as a coach, how can we advance that game? How can we still get learning out within that session? How can we make it more fun? And I think a lot of those things you can still get the kids involved with. You can ask them, what can we change to make it more fun? What can we change to make it more challenging? Um, how can we improve our technique with our pass, for example? Is there anything we can change within the session to help us improve that technique? So I think we can still include children in that choice by asking them and, like I say, giving them a voice to answer those types of questions to keep that session or practice developing to get the most out of it.
How important is humility for coaches when they're centering a child first approach? How important is it that they can step back and say, oh, actually, the kids have come up with a better idea here, or actually, if we do this, they're going to be more engaged? How much do you have to park your ego at the sidelines when you enter the pitch with this kind of approach?
Yeah, again, I think that depends on the coach and the person. Um, I always say the kids come up with the best ideas anyway. So I think if if you have got a bit of an ego and it can be difficult, I'd imagine, to kind of park that and kind of say the kids are right or the kids have got a better idea. Um, but again, like I said, from my experience, I think the kids often come up with the best ideas. And when I was younger and earlier on in my journey, I'd often get stuck on how to move on a session, how to progress it. And as soon as I started asking the children, like it, they were almost doing my job for me because they'd come up with the best ideas, far better than I could come up with because it's their session. And I think sometimes coaches forget that. Sometimes coaches think it's my session, but it's not. It's their session. It's their practice time. It's their fun environment. It's their game. So why not ask them what they want to do within that?
We talked at the beginning about the difference between kind of football academies and community coaching and how they are real separate entities. How important is it, do you think, for organisations like yours at West Brom to have this play their way approach because of what community football and community sport represents?
Yeah, I think it's huge because as I mentioned at the start, it's all about bringing the community together to create hopefully a healthier community. So I think it's massively important for organisations, like ours, if we're attached to a football club. But there's also so many great other organisations out there that are kind of private entities that individuals have set up that are doing some great work. We've got Benton Community within Smethwick that do some fantastic work within the Smethwick area. And you go down to one of their sessions and they'll get 70, 80 kids on an AstroTurf, and it's all game based kind of stuff where they're playing games, they're teenagers, so it's occupying these young people, getting them involved within sport, but then also they're meeting different people from their own community they might not ever met before because they might go to different schools, for example. So yeah, I don't think it's just us as a foundation. There's so many other great organisations within the local area that do some great work to kind of I suppose showcase the community cohesion.
One of the cynical retorts I do get from coaches when we talk about play their way is that fun and play sometimes is at the expense of competition. What would you say to coaches who think that?
I think you can. I think you can still have fun and you can still play with competition. And I think children thrive off that more. If there's a competitive edge, then you're always going to, potentially naturally give that extra 10% or whatever that might be because, we want to win. We want to be the best and we want to win, whatever that competition is. So I would always say to coaches, if you can build in some kind of competition to your practices, that automatically gives a benefit. But as you know, with that, you can link in numeracy skills, for example. So now you kind of looking at kind of cross curriculum kind of development there as well. So you might give little Johnny, can you count the score today? So he's practicing his counting skills. You might ask, an older person to kind of do the league table if you're doing a little tournament. So there's lots of advantages to that, and like I say, you can develop those wider skills within the young participants.
I know you talked about the boys' football team and giving them their roles as managers and them getting the win, and that obviously being a great memory for you. And you talked about working with girls' academy football and the impacts that had on your coaching. But for you personally, what's been your greatest coaching win in your career so far?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it was getting the role within West Brom's boys' academy. It's academy football is nothing I aspired to kind of do. It just kind of fell at my feet. I was working in grassroots football. I did my UEFA B license, and from that B license, it just opened up so many different doors. So I got asked to go and work in the girls' academy. As a coach had left literally at the start of the season, so he'd picked his squad, but then left to go to a different club right at the start of the season. So I got asked to go and help out there, and I stayed there for 3 years within the girls' academy. And then my head of coaching at the girls' academy had links with West Brom boys' academy. So I was doing really well at the girls' academy. Boys' academy needed a coach, so again I just went and had a chat with them, and almost kind of fell into boys' academy football. West Brom's a Category One academy, so it's the kind of top status within the country. So to coach there, for I was only there for one season, but to have that experience for that year and coach, I suppose, at the elite level of youth football within England, was not an achievement. As I said, that wasn't on my plan, but to kind of go and do that was I suppose a real proud moment for me, and to do it at a club that I've supported since a young lad, that was even better.
So go on then, boys' academy, girls' academy. We're talking about play their way. Who has more fun, boys or girls?
I think you'd have to ask them that, and I think it would depend on again the person and their experience. Um, I would say the girls are more. Boys take it very seriously. So when you go into the boys' academy, it's, "Hiya Lee, you okay? Teach me. I want to get better at football." Girls would come in to the training session. "Hi Lee, how's your day been? What you been up to?" More sociable, love a chat. They'd like to tell me what they've done, within their day as well. So yeah, I suppose though that was the two major differences. I would say both teams have fun and enjoy what they do. But yeah, in terms of differences, it was probably that sociable element where the girls were more sociable.
That diversity of voice between boys and girls, how much do you think that's informed your adoption of a child first approach? How much did, probably accidentally, coaching those two very different groups make you realise that we've got to approach all children differently and listen to what they want as opposed to just telling them what we want them to do?
Yeah, I think the majority of my career I'd coached boys up until that moment, and then I got thrown into the girls' academy, and I was like, "Wow, that this is a big kind of change." So I had to learn and adapt very quickly to understand the girls' needs. Girls like to kind of ask more questions and understand why more. So, I'd put on a practice and they'd be like, "Lee, why are we doing this?" Or how do we do this? Or, how does this link to the game? Whereas you'd put on a practice for the boys and they'd just get their head down and go at it and just try and do it to the best of their ability. Whereas girls were a little bit more inquisitive. So yeah, as I said, it was a massive kind of learning curve for me, and I think it shaped me as a coach to open up my eyes to um, as I said, there are differences in everyone. So you might have a group of 20 players. Every single player in that 20 is different. They learn differently. They want to be taught differently. They take information on differently. So it really opened up my eyes having that experience to like say, making sure that I am meeting the needs of everyone in the group that I'm working with.
Lee, you've had a to date incredibly diverse career from academies to grassroots, boys and girls. For an aspiring football coach listening who's just getting into the game, what would your one piece of advice be for them?
Um, a person I worked with very closely over many years said this to me when I was younger, and it was go and get as many experiences as you can. And hopefully, I've tried to do that within my career. As you mentioned there, I've worked in grassroots, boys academy, girls academy, MJPL. I've worked in different countries, and I think I've tried to get as many different experiences as I can, because then that kind of allows you, I think, to meet the needs of your participants better, because you've had so many different experiences dealing with different people. So yeah, that would be my, I suppose, top tip is go and get as many different experiences as you can. If they don't work, that's brilliant, because you know not to do that again. But if it does work, brilliant. You've got a pathway that you can go and develop in. So even if it doesn't work, don't see that as a negative, see it as a positive, because you know to stay away from that particular area. So yeah, just go and get as many different experiences as you can and enjoy it.
Lee, thanks so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening wherever you are. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.